are listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the #1 global business talk and news network on the internet, IBGR, International Business Growth Radio, the world of business at your fingertips. I am Jason Wally Waldron, the secret weapon behind owners, founders, and CEOs of blue-collar industrial companies who apply Exitology to grow faster and maximize the value of their business. When these owners feel trapped in their businesses, we apply Exitology so you can buy back your time and freedom. I am your host for today's show. This season, we have been discussing creating lasting value, even in a challenging economy. And I am thrilled to be joined here today with a gentleman who has lots of stories over his career of creating lasting value, even in a challenging economy. In fact, many economies. And I am honored to be joined here today by Rex Wisehart. Rex Wisehart has made 2 life-changing decisions in his life. The first was when he was 12. He hated living in a small town and promised to never live in a small town again. So there's something there. Second was when he was 23. He had his first quote-unquote job. As we know here on this podcast, it's that stands for just over broke. And he had that for 5 months and he hated it. He promised himself he would become an entrepreneur, and this would be his last job that he ever had. He has a whole bunch of other things that I could tell you about, but I'm going to just bucket it under he did a whole bunch of turnarounds up until 1999, and since 1999, he's been doing a whole bunch of other exciting things that we're just going to talk about with Rex. And so with that, Rex, welcome to the show.
Wally, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am outstanding, and I am honored and thrilled to be here with you. And, rather than have me tell people about your very interesting, varied, and dynamic, and sometimes crazy career, I would love to just kick this off and give you the floor for a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about your history, who you are, and how did we get here talking today?
That's a long story. Sure, we can do it in just an hour.
You know what? The beautiful thing is there's always another podcast coming down the pike. So we'll do the best we can. And, just take us away. I know it's the 70s and Rex had decided that he was going to be an entrepreneur. And then some things started to happen from there. So how did you fall into entrepreneurialism and where has it taken you?
When I was 23, I decided I was not going to have any more jobs. I had no plan, a $59 net worth, and an ex-wife who didn't think this was remotely funny. I picked up 3 or 4 gigs along the way, and sort of by saying to people, sure, I can solve that, when I usually had no idea how to solve that. And then I literally fell into the turnaround business. I was approached by some guys, a bunch of lawyers from Iowa who had invested in a company in Arizona that made amplifiers for bands and lighting systems for bars and restaurants. And they were making a Rolls Royce sort of amplifying system. And the problem was there was virtually no cash. The investors had invested 3 times the money that they'd contracted to invest in the start. And the day that I took over, there was almost $300,000 in judgments against the company and non-payment of payables. Oh, another $280,000 that were about to go there. And a backlog of over $3 million. And dummy Rex, who wasn't smart enough like the other 150 people they'd probably talked to, said, there's a $3 million backlog. I can turn this thing around. So the day I took over, company had 29 employees, and I had never been a boss of anything in my life before. And I walked around the first week and just sort of talked to people and tried to pay attention and tried to figure out how this company got in this much trouble. Because it was relatively easy manufacturing, although design was pretty complex. And on Friday, I fired 20 of the 29 people who worked there. The first time I'd ever fired anyone in my life, and still the hardest business day I ever spent.
Oh man, well, there's a lot of there's a lot of gems in that story, I think. And first of all, I heard just for our listeners, first of all, we talk a lot about mindset. You made a decision, right? It was a crazy decision. Your wife thought you were nuts. You took your $59 net worth and decided to be an entrepreneur. But that's really important, right? And I know that we've talked about this over the past, as far as like you kind of burned the bridges behind you. You're like, we're going into this weird world. And then there's two other things that I heard. And one was you were crazy enough to say, yes, I can do this, even though you didn't really know how you were going to get it done. And then third, and possibly the most important thing, is you didn't shy away from a very, very difficult situation.
I'm really sick, but I think that difficult situations are fun. And when you solve them to the positive, you feel like you've just won the world.
Right.
And I've always been that way. I was a golfer of some repute, and you got to be totally nuts to want to be really good at that game. And I wanted to be really good at that game, which meant that I'd failed a lot, but I'd also done a lot of things that were really hard that went okay.
Right.
So not to say that I'm old or anything, but on Monday morning, I got to the office about 7:15 a.m. and had a telegram. And the telegram was canceling the entire $3 million plus back order.
Oh, the whole reason you wanted to get involved.
Yeah. I get on an airplane and go to Cincinnati to talk to the customer. And the customer had every right to do what they'd done. Oh, by the way, the people that had put the money up with this were a bunch of lawyers. And in my conversations before I took the gig, I said, let's go Chapter 11. And they said, no, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
I got on an airplane in Cincinnati, flew back to Phoenix, threw the company in Chapter 11, and then called the owners and told them I'd done it, which made for some pretty interesting conversations.
I'll bet not all of the discussions were PG-13 at that point.
They were not.
So then what happened?
Then what happened was I fired the other 6 more people, and there were 3 people left, and they were all technical types. And I said, guys, we have failed at building a Rolls-Royce amplifier. I think I see the carpenters coming. I want something really simple, and I want it by the 1st of May. And this is in January. I want it by 1st of May. I want it UL approved, and I want some IP in there so I can protect it and we can go build some stuff. Mm-hmm. And oh, by the way, we're going to show it at the once every or 3 times a year show in June in Anaheim, California, at the old Disneyland Convention Center, which doesn't even exist anymore. And I had $37,000 left, and I took the $37,000 and turned it into 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s, brought in a bag full of cash and says, here it is. There ain't no more. I need what you're going to give me, and I need it by this day, and we're going to show in there. And if you don't spend all this money, put it in your pocket and don't tell me, and walked out.
I love the I'm a big fan of the idea of constraints create creativity, and there's a lot of positive and maybe negative constraints in that situation.
There was a lot of negatives, but I was
very
23 and didn't know what the hell I was doing. Okay. Long story short, my guys came up with something that I thought had a real shot, but the shows were expensive. And I procrastinated in sending the money in for the show. Mm-hmm. And finally sent it in, and we get ready to go to Anaheim for the show. And we had 7 models of the amplifier that these guys had built.
Yep.
And I needed a crowd to demonstrate it to help turn this company around. And we get there, and I find my booth space. And it's off to the room in the side, a room in the side that was maybe 40 by 60 feet.
So you're in the middle of nowhere, basically.
In the middle of nowhere, and I needed traffic.
So what'd you do?
Out of my own pocket, I was willing to go pay somebody to switch spaces with me, and nobody would. 5 minutes before the show opened, remember, this is 1973. When people still drank a lot. 5 minutes before the show opened, they rolled in a portable bar into my room, and it was the only bar in the place.
Ah, there we go. There's some guerrilla marketing before it was called that.
And I certainly had nothing to do to create it, but it sure was. So what my guys had done is they invented the first amplifier that when you poured beer on it, it would just shut off, not blow up.
Oh, there you go.
And so remember, this $1973. In 2.5 days of the show, we sold $2.9 million worth of this stuff. Then it was an interesting thing to figure out how to build all that stuff with no money, but we got that done. It was a massive success given where we'd started. And that story bought me 6 or 8 years of getting good at the turnaround business until I finally got good at it. And that's how I made my living for 30 years.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of great stuff to unpack there, but I think the most important things that I heard is really just the idea of just facing the situation head on and really being clear with everybody up and down the chain. Look, here's the situation. Now, what about it? Because at the end of the day, when you're in a tricky situation, you can really just do your best and see where you end up, right?
You have to try to figure out the pluses and minuses of all the crazy ideas you're going to have, and then figure the one that has the highest probability of success, given the probably poor options that you have of getting that done, and go for it. And you only go for one thing. You don't go for 6 things, hoping one of them works. You've only got the bandwidth to go for one.
Yeah, that's really good. So in the next few sections here, we'll start to unpack some more stories from your career, including starting a company, growing a company, and selling a company, and we're gonna have some fun with this. But we're gonna take a short 2-minute break here, folks. Before we take that break, you can always join us for an executive briefing where we talk about these concepts and open our programming up to Q&A. Just go to xtology.com, click on the executive briefing tab, and you will see what to do from there. We'll be back after 2 minutes. You are listening to the Xtology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network.